Well, I'm thrilled to have Andre Scheepers back with us today. And Andre, I must say, just looking at what we're going to cover today, I ask myself again, where in recent military history did soldiers operate under the same sort of pressure as chaps like you did? In the frequency of your deployments and the tough assignments that you were given on a repeated basis is quite astonishing. If there is a precedent out there or somebody who can step up and claim to have operated at the same level for as long as you did, I'd very much like to hear from them. But I know you want to talk about some of the events and some of the people that were very important to you. So enough from me, Andre. I'll just let you take it from there, and we'll then get into the specifics.
Thank you very much, Hannes. I count it a privilege, and I thank you for this opportunity for giving me an interview. Why I've requested this interview is because I just want to address 5 ops, Hannes, just 5. There are about 14 others that I can speak about, but I want to particularly speak about these 5 because there were 5 men associated with these ops, perhaps 6, that were later or subsequently killed in action. And Hannes, these were very precious men. They were fine soldiers. They were brave. They were excellent soldiers. I really just worked with the best. And I think we can't forget them. And so I would like their names to go down in the annals of history. And yes, the history books must record their names because they were such good soldiers. And because they worked with me, I knew them very well. They were very, very good friends of mine. My focus this afternoon is really just to focus on these men and to acknowledge them and to give them the credit. And though I was the ground commander, it's all about these men and their bravery. And so if I may just take this opportunity, I would like to extend my heartfelt sympathy and my condolences to the families, the extended families, the immediate families of these men. I don't know where they are and who they are, but all I can say is that they were exceptionally brave men. Really, they were. And I'm quite touched by that because it's 40 years down the road and I still remember their faces and their smile and their speech and their reasoning. And these families, if they hear these names, I want to mention them. Bob Mackenzie, Roger England, Dave Berry, Rob Heppel, Cal Story. And I was also there in 1977 when David O'Sullivan, now he was a sniper, he shot for the Queen, by accident shot Dick Betterman as he was coming back to base. So I was there with Bob Mackenzie when that happened. But Hannes, these were very brave men. And I just want to say to the families that they have every reason to be very, very proud of these men because they were brave and they were excellent soldiers and we don't want to forget them.
Well,
so where do you want me to begin?
I'm very happy that I can help you pay this tribute. The fact that we can do this together, I'm delighted that I can be of some assistance because this is a truly worthy cause. Andre, let's start with Cal's story because that was really the early days for you in the SAS, and I know this all was unfolding around Marymount Mission, which, as we know, was a hotbed of support for the enemy. And I know you got into a bit of trouble there over the swimming pool, I think, because
right.
The priests or the missionaries wouldn't allow the Rhodesian security forces to use the swimming pool. I know Peter van der Baal came. Well, anyway, you might want to tell that story, but I know it was from here that the operations were going into Mozambique, and I'll leave you to tell the rest of the story.
No, thanks, Hannes. The date we're looking at around about September 75, because Cal was killed on the 2nd of September. And our deployment was from Marymount, up there in the northeast, the Mukumbura area. So we did extensive patrolling in that area. We were cross-graining, looking for spoor, and we were ambushing and just general patrols. But Hannes, Cal's story was a true friend of mine. Let me tell you why. I went into the ministry, and I was in the ministry for 36 years, but his parents were in Worcester with me. So I was posted to Worcester. It was the Church of England. I was the rector, and I was there for 2 years. I was the minister there, and his parents were there as well. But Cal was a true friend of mine. So let me just explain very briefly. We were sitting around the campfire chatting until about 11 o'clock that night. And he was deploying the next morning. We'd all have turns to deploy. We'd go out and then come back and go out like that. And he was busy telling me all about his life. He was a good man, Hannes. He was a good soldier, a very intelligent man. And my motive for telling you this is because of the strange insight that I had into Cal's death. Now, I know people might not accept what I'm saying, but this actually really happened. As he was talking to me about his life, it was late at night, I had this strange invisible wave, honestly, that came over me to show me absolutely he was going to be killed. I knew that. And this was a very unusual experience because I had 4 very potent experiences like that in the military, and they all happened absolutely accurately as it was revealed to me. But I couldn't substantiate what I had experienced at the time. And so I couldn't really tell Cal. And I went to bed that night near midnight, very sad, very upset because of what I had encountered. And so what happened the next day, Cal deployed with his call sign, 4 men. And from what I understand, I wasn't with them. But about 20 Frelimo used dead ground to assault the call sign and their position. And they shot Cal there in the chest, and he died instantly. But the commander, who was very brave, stood over Cal's body. The rest of the call sign retreated into like a riverbed, and they shot that commander that was standing over Cal's body. And so they managed to stave off the attack by the Frelimo soldiers. And that's how Cal's life ended. And so the next day I was there with Brian Robertson. He was the CO of SAS. And also I was standing next to a signaller, a corporal. His name was David Scales. And they flew the body back in a body bag. And I inspected the body. I always did that, Hannes, because it meant a lot to me. I wanted to see how the man died. And those thoughts would always stick in my memory. But that was what happened to Cal's story. And I thought I'd just mention that to you because he's a very fine man. He's a good man. And still to this day, I remember Cal and his life very vividly.
Very sad. Andre, let's fast forward now to I think your first deployment as an SAS officer down in southern Mozambique. I think you were tasked to go down and attack the trains.
This was around about middle of the year 1978. Remember, I'd come from RLI. And yeah, I think it was July 78, Hannes. Bob Mackenzie, he's a very brave man. He was a powerful leader. He called me into his office. I'll never forget his words that he said to me. He said to me, Andre, I'm going to make you a top SAS operator. So I thought about that. Not the top operator, but he's going to turn me into a top operator. And he was serious. You know, after that, Hannes, I had so many privileges that many other officers didn't have. He really used me and he trained me very well. But he sent me on an NCO training camp at the Guai River. So I trained about 13 NCOs. And I didn't want to go on that, Hannes. I said to Bob, that's administrative, that's training troop stuff. He said, no, Andre, you've got to go on that, because if you want to become a staff officer eventually, you need all this administrative experience. So anyway, I went to Guai River and I did all that. And I think that went very well. And I was very privileged to train all those SAS NCOs, you know, to develop and to become sergeants eventually. But on return, he immediately sent me to do a train ambush down there by Rhodesian, between Mapai and Rhodesian. And he sent with me to help me, because remember, I was fairly new in SAS operations, and I was quite teachable. He sent me two top operators, Koos Lewis, who was the SSM, and Sergeant Dave Berry. They accompanied me. And before I could go on that train ambush, I first had to go on a 3-day course to Salisbury, you know, where the main railway station was, the railways. And they taught me all about trains. I just knew all about diesel electric trains. I knew the mechanics. I knew where to take them out. I became a train driver. I could drive the train. And looking back, perhaps I should have been a train driver and not a soldier, because I think I would have been a better train driver than a soldier. But I think SAS paid for that, because South Africa, I don't know who paid. It may have come out of the squadron funds, but South Africa wanted me to go and take out this diesel electric train, because it involved economics. They said to me, take out this train because we want to sell Mozambican government another train. So it was all about money. And I didn't like this idea, Hannes, because they were using me. I was miles away from my country. My life was at risk. And here I'm taking out these trains for financial reasons. But that's how, you know, the slopes, the South Africans thought. They were using us. I'm not sure where we flew from. But if we flew from Mbalahuta, you know, that's like 300 kilometers to Rhodesian. And it was a rough ride. There's a lot of turbulence. The men were vomiting. But maybe we flew from Buffalo Range, which was 400 kilometers away. And that would have taken about 3 hours. Anyway, we jumped in that night at about 11 o'clock. It was a good drop in. The parachutes were safely covered. There were no injuries. I was very happy about that. And on landing, I think, you know, my modus operandi was I'd sit still and just listen for a few hours. I was always like that. I was very cautious. I was listening out for any noise in the area. But in the distance, I heard a very loud screeching noise. It was a constant hissing noise. So I said to Koos Lewis and Dave Berry, you know, we're near the rail station, because that's steam being emitted from the engine. We're by the station, but they didn't quite agree with me. They put up with me. They were very experienced soldiers. So I said, okay, but arrogant. I'll take Dave with me. We'll go and do a reconnaissance, which was a dangerous thing to do, because that land was flat as a pancake. There were no features. So I set off in the middle of the night, walked about nearly 2 kilometers. And of course, you know, I had to get back to my call sign within 100 meters. So my compass bearing had to be very accurate, Hannes, you see. But I came to this huge pan of a big marshland, and there were millions of frogs. And they were all croaking, you see. And that was the noise that I heard. So, you know, for those that are interested in English grammar, because I teach English at school, the collective noun for that is called a chorus of frogs, or an army of frogs. And that was so appropriate. So I went back and I humbled myself and I said to the men, look, that's not the railway station. They were frogs. That's what was making the noise. But those frogs were making such a loud noise, they hurt your ears. Honestly, the decibels were so high, they were screeching. Anyway, honestly, we set off and we got to the railway line the next morning. I can't explain to you. It's the most depressive countryside I've ever been in. It was flat, it was depressing, it was bleak. The temperature during the day was about 30, I'm speaking about centigrade, about 43, 42 degrees, like in the Zambezi Valley. And there's no shade. There were just little shrubs about waist height. And so we had to wait in that area. So what I did was I got the men to set up the ambush position closer to the railway line, and I pulled them back to find a bit of shade, very skimpy. And then when we heard the train coming, we'd run forward, get into position, and we would initiate the ambush. That train arrived after 2 days. Now, Hannes, I must tell you something that happened. While I was there, I fell into like a trance. I had a vision, and I saw the heavens on fire. I don't know where I was. I wasn't in my body. And the heavens were ablaze. It was like a nuclear fire. And I saw millions of men. They're like matchsticks, millions of men. And their faces were gnawed with fear and death. Their skin was pale gray, white, and they were all being killed. And so I realized this was a vision from God. And God was saying to me that when he comes again, the Lord Jesus Christ, then he's going to punish and judge all those that are his opposition. So I quickly ran back to the men. I gathered them around me, and I told them what I had experienced. And they looked at me, they believed me because of the seriousness on my face. I'd never make these things up, Hannes. And they believed me. But anyway, Hannes, when I got back to the squadron, I said to Bob Mackenzie, this is all on record. I said, Bob, please may I speak to the squadron and tell them what I experienced, because it was a spiritual experience. And he gave me permission. Now, Bob was very anti-Christianity. So he fell the men in the whole squadron. They stood at ease. So I was at a tremendous advantage. It was like preaching from behind the pulpit because they couldn't move. So they were standing at ease. And you had all these big men like grizzly bears, 16-inch arms, standing there looking at me. And I told them what I experienced. And, well, they couldn't move. They had to listen, you see. And after I'd finished, RSM Allen, Pete Allen, they called him Snake Allen. He was the RSM. That was like his holy ground. He shouted out from his head to my easel shed to my right. He said, Lieutenant Scheepers, sir, you don't use my drill square as a pulpit. I said, RSM, with due respect, God told me to tell these men, and there's nothing in the world that will stop me. I fear no man. And he just kept quiet. But Hannes, 3 of those SAS men, hardened soldiers, they went into the ministry because of what I told them, because of what I experienced. They could see the genuineness of what I was telling them. But anyway, Hannes, the train arrived. See, that was just a spiritual encounter. Very unusual, but that's what I was. And the train arrived. It was going at an incredible speed. I never considered the speed of the train. It was a diesel electric, huge. It was a long train. And we initiated with RPG-7 and RPD. The train went past us and exploded. Because remember, Hannes, I knew where to shoot. I told the men. And there's a funny side to this because we had to have a bit of humor. On top of the carriages of all these, of the carriages, the Falima had sandbagged the carriages and they were sitting behind the sandbags. A heap of them, And so after the train exploded, I looked into the carriages, and inside the carriages were just hundreds of people, civilians, children, mothers, babies, men, families. So I said to the men, look here, men, you are not to shoot into the carriages. That's my specific command. And so they focused on the Falima on top. And we took them out. But what was funny, as we initiated fire, so we went from the engine to the men on top, these Falima soldiers were jumping off the carriages. Now, if you look at trains, these carriages, these coaches are about 10 feet high, fast-moving train, and they were just jumping off, Hannes. No one stood to fight, not one, out of that whole train. And they just jumped off and they'd scurry into the bush like, rabbits. And I thought to myself, how many of them of the Falima must have experienced sprained ankles? Because really, it was quite an incredible feat to jump off that train at that speed. But so my explicit instruction was I didn't want one civilian killed. So we didn't kill any civilians. The men knew how to shoot. So we took out the guys on top of the train. And why I mention this is because, Dave Berry was my sergeant there. And, he subsequently got killed in action. But I thought that was quite a good op, and it was very humorous. It was very funny, besides the spiritual element.
And South Africans got to sell another diesel engine.
Yes, that's what they were just in the money. They were a funny bunch. They really weren't interested in us. And I didn't like that, Hannes. I didn't like the slopes for that reason.
Andre, let's go on to, I know you did a big mine laying operation down in Mapai, I think it was, near Mapai. ended up in a big assault. You got yourself into quite a tight spot down there.
It was the most fearful assault that I experienced in my life. I don't know if it was the most dangerous, because I had many of these contexts, but this was really a big one, Hannes. And I think as a call sign, we were very, very blessed to survive that attack. So that was shortly after the Rhodesian train ambush. I was deployed back into the Russian front. It was just up after up. And I was laying landmines in the Malvernia, Mapai region. That was always a hot area, Hannes, because Mapai was like a headquarters, you see, and so they're always sending out these patrolling call signs. And I think, Hannes, I'm guessing that was around about the middle of 78. My OC was Bob Mackenzie, because Rob Johnson only became OC only towards the, I think, September, October of the same year. So I was still under Bob. And I was given 5 men under my command. One was an officer, and he was trying SAS selection. He had passed the physical. Now, you and I know that it wasn't the physical that made a soldier. So now he had to pass the operational selection. So he came under my instruction, and I was the assessing officer. So I did that to a lot of men. I would initiate them into combat, and I took my duty very serious to protect these men, you know, when in combat, especially when they were experiencing live firefight for the first time. So I mentioned this contact because it was a unique experience. I'll never forget it. Like I said, it's 45 years on, and I'll never forget this. And in that contact, we were on the back foot because we were being attacked by the Falima. They were actually bringing the fight to us. And so they launched a full frontal assault on our position. And what scared me there was the roles had been reversed. Normally, I was the aggressor. Now, they were assaulting us, and they weren't stopping us. They were skirmishing towards us, and we were trying to withdraw and get out of the situation. I had a similar experience to that at Monte Cassino. I remember when we killed those East German officers, and that assault line with the Goranov machine gun on the other side, a long extent line, hundreds of meters, assaulted us. And I didn't know how to handle that because the assault line was too long. It wasn't just a matter of initiating the front. Our flanks were being exposed as well. But let me explain the situation. We laid a landmine, we jumped in, laid the landmine along in the road alongside the railway line. We walked back approximately 12 kilometers. I think it was 12. The men think it was further. And we heard this loud boom, boom in the distance. And where we just laid the landmine. So that obviously detonated the landmine. And so I decided it was time for a tea break. We'd walk non-stop, 12 kilometers, about that. And in front of me was a little clumpy of bush, sort of trees, about 7 trees, half dead. But the terrain was flat grassland. It's like there in Kenya, you know, the Serengeti National Park. It was flat like that. It was just grass. So we sat there and we had a cup of tea, and Corporal Steve Klusniak, he was a man that worked with me quite a bit. He was a very capable corporal. He was very intelligent, very switched on. I liked working with him. He asked me if he could set up his claymore on our spoor, on our tracks. So I was a bit hesitant. I said, Steve, that's unnecessary. Why do you want to do that? We're only going to be here for 20 minutes and then we're going again. Anyway, I said, okay. And soon afterwards, about 20 minutes, a Falima line, sweep line, advanced on our position. And there were about 14 Falima coming towards us. We only saw them through the grass once they were about 70 meters ahead of us, you know, with their olive uniforms. And I mention this because our lives were really, really threatened. For me, this was the worst punch-up I had, worse than any in RLI Fire Force or in SAS camp attacks. And they were bent on assaulting our position. And they were determined, they were very aggressive, you know, to get us. And so what they did was, their fire towards us was sustained. It was fairly accurate, and it was low from the whole front. And they quickly fired 6 RPG-7s at our position. And they all exploded no more than 5 to 8 meters around about us. So that's really close. And so that I don't exaggerate. You know, these rockets, 3 exploded in the tree trunks above our head, and the other exploded in the sand, in the ground around about us. But I'd like to quote Corporal Klusnek so that I represent the men. Let the men speak, and I don't exaggerate. But this is what he says. I quote him. It's in our book, Hannes. He says, "Chaos followed. I'd never been under such intense attack before. At least 6, if not more, RPG rockets exploded into the trees above our heads and sand in close proximity, so fast that they sounded as if they were coming from an automatic launcher. One exploded about 6 feet above my head." That's Corporal Klusnek speaking. Now, it might not seem much, but you know, for our viewers, but when an RPG-7 explodes close to you, that explosion is shattering, Hannes. It's shattering. And the shock waves actually impair your balance so that you get confused. You don't know where you are. And, you know, for a while, I couldn't speak on the radio. I was totally deaf. And I didn't even know where I was. You know, I had to find out what the enemy to the front. You know, it really sort of disorientated me. But Steve Klusnek, to make the matter worse, got some shrapnel in his head, and I think on the left side of his forehead. So I had this man bleeding. I had these guys shooting all these rockets at me, and I had this extended line, well over 100 meters, assaulting us. And behind me, there's no cover. It was just grassland. So even if you ran back or skirmished back 200-300 meters, they could still shoot you in the back because there's just no cover. So we were in quite a situation. So what frightened me about that attack was the length of the assault line. It was well over 100 meters. And while we were trying to suppress the enemy to our front. Sorry, Hannes?
Did Steve detonate the claymore?
Yes. So while the enemy to our fronts, the fire was coming from our sides. So our flanks were being exposed. So we were going to get shot from the side. That even scared me more because, you know, Hannes, when you have a contact, you try and shoot the enemy to your front. But if you're going to try and engage the enemy to your sides, then you have to change your posture. You have to change. You can't engage both sides. And so I couldn't effectively cover both angles. And I knew that if the Frelimo commando had decided to do a flanking attack, they would overrun our position, and we would all be killed because we had no cover to retreat to. And they extend their advanced line, and they were advancing. They're getting real close up. Wasn't halting. Anyway, it was only the initiating of a mini claymore by Corporal Klusnek, because he had set it up and he laid the wires back and he had his own homemade switch. He initiated that. You see, he tripped the switch. And this claymore went off with a very loud bang. And the Frelimo went to ground. And so I thought, well, this is our opportunity to make a withdrawal. And so we skirmished back, all under cover. But going back, I noticed I couldn't see the lieutenant. I didn't know where he was. And he was, it was my responsibility. I had to secure his safety because he was busy learning. So I went back into the combat area. And I got on my knees and I was calling out for this man, you see. And I remember there's a blade of grass, sort of, knee height, sort of sticking in my nose. And it just went like that. A bullet went through my lips and shot down the blade of grass. But to be honest, I was a bit peeved off because I was under heavy fire and I couldn't find this lieutenant. Anyway, I called out to his name, but you know what he had done? And he had rightly withdrawn to the crash RV about 50 meters behind us as soon as the Frelimo opened fire. But I didn't know that. Anyway, we managed to separate ourselves from the Frelimo and we sort of ran for our lives. And this was the only time that I ever failed an officer trying to join SAS in his operation selection. So when I got back to camp, the adjutant was Captain Mike Curtin. He said, "Andre, do you think my judgment was sound in failing this officer?" And I said, "Mike, if he had to stay in this operation, he's going to get killed. He's not ready for this kind of dangerous work." And that was a sad thing. I didn't like doing that, Hannes. He is a good man. He is an intelligent man. He is a strong man. But I thought that was the best thing for him to be RTU'd, to live and to maybe fight another day and and try selection later. So I want to confess to you and to the audience, I had a problem when I was scared. I don't know if this happened to other men. You know, when the enemy like that was assaulting me and I was facing death in the face, I knew I was going to die. I couldn't get out of the situation. I would shake and I'd get very nervous and I'd hyperventilate. You see, now I was the officer in control. Remember, I had to lead by example. And because that affected my breathing. Now, I don't know if you know, when a sniper, to be a good sniper, has to regulate his breathing. You know, he's not allowed to be affected by anything that's going around about him. His breathing must be regulated. It must be steady, and he must just shoot. Doom, doom, doom. And I knew all that in theory, but when my life was at stake, and I could do that on the firing range, but I panicked and I'd hyperventilate, and I lost a lot of my mental discipline like that because I thought I just had to get out to live, and I'm just telling you that because that wasn't a very good thing for me to do. But it was one of my weaknesses in combat. But it only happened when I was really threatened and I thought I was going to die.
Well, Andre, I think you've forgiven, taken into account all the pressures you were under, and so consistently. But Andre, I know you've got another recollection about deployment down in that same area around Mapai. Another incident with a train, if I remember correctly.
This is an incredible story. I tell you, it's hard to believe, but it was also around about mid-78, sometime. I did a lot of deployments, honestly, but it was a very humorous incident. But at the same time, honest, it was very serious. We were involved in frequent weekly sorties into the Gaza province, laying mines, sabotaging the railway line, trying to ambush between Rhodesian and Mapai. That's what I was doing a lot. And I was given a call sign of sort of new soldiers. It was Charlie Dukes, Rob Heppel, Roger England, and myself. So I had 3 men with me. And these were fine men. And my motive for telling you this, remember Rob Heppel and Roger England were subsequently killed, and I knew them very well. But on this op, they were with me. They were my responsibility. And I want to mention this operation because I want to honor these men, Hannes, because they were really good soldiers. And I had Charlie Dukes, who had just come out of training troop. He's this tall, lanky American. And he needed some combat experience, so they gave him to me. And we deployed to do a train ambush above Mapai, about 100 kilometers into Gaza province. And I honestly felt very sorry for these men because as we were going in, the pilot, I don't know who the pilot was, he dropped us over the railway line by accident. And under us, directly under us, was the train. Now, imagine the chance in the whole Gaza province of that happening. It was incredible. And these men, for the first time, dropped into this kind of situation. And on top of the train were the Falima soldiers. So as we were coming down, they were shooting at us. And the chopper pilot, the Dakota pilot, took evasive action. Drastic. And we were standing in the door. And we were tumbling around. And the dispatcher wasn't very good. He panicked. He really did panic. He just said, go, 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 go. And we just jumped. And below us was the train. And I'd like to quote Charlie Dukes. So it's not coming from me, Hannes. So I'm not exaggerating. This is what actually happened. It was unique. Charlie Dukes writes, and this is also in the book, our book, Hannes. He says, my first op with you in Mozambique. That's his first op. Poor guy. Was when we jumped in to blow the train and to lay a mine in the road next to the rail. The only problem was that while jumping in, the train was under us, shooting at the aircraft. The pilot took evasive action to dodge the bullets coming up as the 4 of us jumped while the train was directly under us. Now, that was an incredible thing. To experience that, was quite something. So we jumped in from about 700 meters. That is quite high, because as the pilot took evasive action, he must have pulled the throttle up, but he went up, you see, and we just jumped. It was like a panic situation. We shouldn't have jumped, Hannes. That wasn't a good deployment, that. But coming down, so we had these guys shooting us. You can't get your rifle out. I thought I was going to be run over by the train because I was heading straight for the front of the train engine. It was coming directly towards me. And then only at the last moment, I said, "Oh God, help me, please," because I didn't want to be run over by the train. Like a gust of wind. There was no wind, Hannes. There was no wind. A gust of wind just happened and it blew me to the side of the train. And the train just skimmed past me. Otherwise, it would have hit me smack on frontal. Anyway, I'll never forget that. You see, I believe that was God answering my prayer. But on landing, I know how to encourage his men. So I thought I'd take on the role of a counselor. You see, I like to counsel people. So I said to them, you guys, their nerves were shattered. What a way to enter into, the Russian front. I said, guys, this is not how it should have happened. And I said, but, it could have been worse. We're all okay. And thank God the train was moving fast, because if it was static or going slowly, then it would have given the Philima more time to get us. But we only had like 30, 40 seconds and the train went past and the Philima kept on shooting at us, but then they shot off into the distance. And I said, see it like a cup of water. Either you can see the cup half full or half empty. Well, I see this cup as half full, guys. So I said, cheer up. Anyway, I think I revived their spirits a bit. And I think my counsel might have helped a bit. I like to encourage the men, in situations like that. I thought I'd trick the Philima, Hannes. You see, that's a bit of a sneaky character, Hannes. I said, right, we're going to lay explosives on the landmine. And we're going to make it obvious. They're going to find the explosives. But on the road, alongside the railway line, because they're going to deploy by vehicle. You see, I knew they're going to come very soon. And they did. You see, they did. Because they knew about us. I'd lay a huge landmine. And so intelligence told us that the Philima did arrive soon after that, as expected. And they found the explosives. That was good. And then they were quite chuffed with themselves. And they got into their bus, to take off and they had the landmine. So, I had an edge over them there. But I mentioned that ops because it was very unusual. But Rob Heppel and Roger England were fine men, very brave men, very good soldiers. They were subsequently killed in action. Yeah.
Andre, let's go from the east to the west to one. I'm not sure how often it happened, but your deployment into Botswana, which is quite an unusual one and quite an interesting story and some interesting challenges.
So let me tell you about this op. I don't think many people even know the facts about this op. So, we took out that Strela gang in the Urungwe. When was that? About November 78. So I came back and I was immediately deployed by Bob into Botswana for about 8 days. I'd never been into Botswana before. And they sent with me Dave Berry, a sergeant, and I can't remember Hannes. I think Chris Lewis was with me. I'm convinced he was with me. Anyway, our mission was to shoot down a DC-7 aircraft. It was Swedish-owned, Swedish-operated, and the Swedes, they were transporting tour recruits from Francistown to Dar es Salaam in Tanzania to be trained. And so my orders were very strict, very strict. I was told that I had to shoot down this aircraft, but I was not to have any contact with BDF because Rhodesia didn't want to open up a front on the east. They didn't want that, okay? So, that's understandable. So it was a bit difficult for me to obey those orders. They were tall orders because we were only 40 meters from the road. And during those 8 days, about 200 Zandler came past us, but they were intermingled with the BDF. Because what was happening, the BDF were picking them up north there by Victoria Falls and then bringing them down this main road and dropping them off in the op tangent area, like north of Blawayo. So we were right there, but I was told not to kill BDF. Otherwise, we could have done that. But I don't think many people know this, Hannes. And so you can contact these men. But Daryl Watt, sometime around about this time, and Billy Hayes and Bruce Spargo and Dion Arangis. They did a camp attack onto a Zipra base in Zambia, just north of Kariba. Mm-hmm. And they managed to capture 3 of the latest Strela launches. And they also captured a RPG-7 folding RPG-7, which is the first one I'd ever encountered. Anyway, I was given one of these new Strela launches, SAM-7s, and we were deployed into Botswana around about the Wankie area. Hannes, I'm not sure, you see, so we went up that way. But I know there's about 170 kilometers north of Francistown. Now, I'll tell you why I'm mentioning this. I know people question this. I've had dozens of emails about this. But you know, Hannes, shooting down an aircraft using a Strela, a SAM-7, was the easiest thing in the world. Because a lot of the men feel, and I don't agree, but that's my opinion only. They feel the 2 Dakotas, the 2 Viscounts that were shot down in Rhodesia were shot down because explosives were put in the baggage container department. But I think no, I think they were taken out by Strela because the Zipra were bringing a lot of Strela. These 3 were going to come in, and they had Strela in their Urungwe. So that's my thinking, you see. Yeah. And honestly, I could teach my children at primary school to use a Strela. I could teach my grandchildren on how to use a Strela. But what you do, this is how simple it was. You wait in the flight path of the aircraft. I had men watching out for the aircraft. Intelligence would also communicate with me from Capt saying, look, the aircraft from the DC-7 from Francistown is leaving now, get ready. And I just wait for it to come. I was under its flight path, you see. And then I would activate the power supply, and I'd get the system stabilized. Then I'd wait for it to come past me, just over me. I'd aim at it like that. And then I would pull half trigger, just waiting. And that would home in on the aircraft because the light in the sights would go on. The light would go on like a red light. And then there's a buzzing sound. You see this, the SAM-7 centimeters ready. And then I pull full trigger. And that's it. The aircraft's gone. I just step out from a few paces from under the bush and take it out. That's how easy it was. And that's what Zipra were doing. You see, that's why they were been giving these weapons. But our mission was unsuccessful, because after 8 days of waiting, the DC-7 never arrived. And I was told there was a security leak. I can't believe that. But someone had told them that we were waiting for them. Mm-hmm. So why I want to tell you this all. A big issue. We were briefed at Capt. Intelligence told me that this is a very unusual op because the area I'm going into, there were man-eating lions. So, Hannes, I didn't think much about this. I mean, what's man-eating lions compared to Zipra and BDF? You know what I mean? I was more worried about the enemy. And I just took it with a pinch of salt, you see. So we went in, and that night, the first night, we positioned ourselves next to the road. Now, I mean, you'll know more than I do, but from my experience in the Kruger National Park, when these big lions roar, you can hear them 2-3 kilometers away. It's really scary, the decibels of their roar. But these lions, they weren't roaring. They were like barking, grunting, and they were going around our position. So I said to the men, you guys, these lions, they're out to get us. That's why they're here. And I said, look, this is very serious. So we set up the call sign in a circle. The diameter of our call sign was about 10 meters, not much, 10 meters. I plonked myself in the middle with the radio under a little bush. I always like, in the middle, so that I could control if anything happened. And my plan actually failed. I thought it was a brilliant plan. I said to the men, I don't know if you've ever heard of this. I said, you put paracord around our perimeter, about 1 meter high. You hang your water bottle mugs, by the handles on the paracord. Some were aluminium, some were metal. And if an intruder touches that paracord, well, the mug's going to drop. There'll be a clanging sound and we'll be alerted. We'll wake up. Anyway, Hannes, that didn't work for me, because about 1 o'clock that morning, I was sleeping and I felt this very hot, warm breath on the left side of my face. And the breath was putrid. It was stinking like rotten meat. And I opened my eyes, and in front of me was this big lion with a mane. It must have been about 20 inches across, and it was smelling me on my cheek. So I didn't want to move. My rifle was right next to me, Hannes. My rifle was like my wife, and I never parted from my rifle. I was the only man. I didn't use AKMs or anything like that. I just used my FN, because when the Terrors used to hide behind the trees, my FN would go through the tree. An AK wouldn't go through the tree, so I'd shoot them right through the tree. You see, so I like my FN. I always deployed with an FN, and the cocking handle was there. And so I still have calluses now, 40 odd years from the cocking handle on the FN. And it's getting a bit arthritic now from arthritis. Yeah, that's it. And anyway, I couldn't move. And I was scared to move because I thought it would chomp me on the neck. But it was huge, and its breath was really pungent. Anyway, Corporal James Scorgie was alerted by the lions, and he woke up, and he alerted the call sign by tapping. And I just want to show you this was our standard operating procedure. On the rifle magazines, we would just go, that's all, and we'd wake up. No more, no talking, and we're all alert. And he did that, and he woke up all the men. And so we're all tapping, we're all waking up. But that backfired on us, because now the lions were in the arena, 2 of them, with the tapping going around. They were totally surrounded. It was like a circus arena. And next minute, Hannes, James Scorgie was an excellent man. I remember him. He had a tremendous sense of humor. I liked him. I don't know where he is in the world. But these lions started roaring and running around in our middle. Now, I'm sitting in the middle, you see, with the men around me, 10-meter diameter, not big. And this lion was charging around me like this. And what made matters worse was, I'd sit up in my sleeping bag. So we're all sitting up. So now the 2 lions, there were 2, so they were really surrounded by us. It wasn't intentional. And they were roaring, and they were running around. And they would come storming towards you, and they'd halt with a screech, and the sand would splatter onto your sleeping bags. And these beasts were big, because as I sat in my sleeping bags, their shoulders were above my head. They were huge, Hannes. So I thought, oh no, man, what do I do in a situation like this? I just wished I wasn't in the middle.
You don't want to shoot.
Sorry?
You don't want to shoot, because then you come.
No, you can't shoot. Hannes, we're in an ambush position, you see. And this carried on for quite a while. But what made it worse, all the men sat up now, with the tapping, frantic. And so we're all alert. But then we realized what the situation was. And as the lion would run towards you, well, it was no longer tapping to wake anybody up, because we were all awake. So when the lion charged me, I would go to chase it away. And we were all doing that. So you can imagine the consternation. So the lions were in absolute panic. And it sounded like a rock band. We were all just tapping, because no one wanted the lion to come towards them. And it was terrible. And eventually, the lion just gracefully just jumped right up, about 6 feet high, jumped right over our position and ran off into the bush. Next morning, right next to my head, were the spoor of this one lion that I smelled. And it was the size like of a dinner plate, 7 inches from my head. And but after the lions jumped off and went into the bush, we just sat there for a moment's silence, and then we just started laughing. We couldn't stop laughing, Hannes. It was so funny. But it wasn't a laughter from, that was humorous, hilarious. It was like a stress release thing.
Yeah.
We'd never experienced this before. And the men were laughing so loud that I said to them, you guys, you've got to stop laughing. We're making a tremendous noise. But those lions kept on for the next 7 nights around about us. They were intent on getting us. And so I never had such an alert call sign all my life. We all wanted to do guard duty, all of us, because, these lions would come late at night, early morning. But it was really scary, Hannes, facing the stealth of these lions. But really, it sounded like a rock band and like a circus arena, with these lions running around. But I mentioned Dave Berry because he was killed after that, and after the war. And they sent me to Petersburg, where all the mirages were. And from there, I went under military escort to Louis Trichardt up in the mountains. And there I conducted, in conjunction with the chaplain, the military chaplain, Bull Dodgen, their memorial service. It was a very sad occasion because SAS were there, South Africa were there, and David Berry's family, his wife and his children were all there. And I conducted that service in conjunction with Billy Dodgen. But it was sad to see that, the camp there up in the mountains was called Empangeni. And that bothered me because up in that high altitude, they're deploying to the low veld. And I thought, how could these men condition? If I was the officer, I'd never allow that. Dyke, I think RAR took out Dave Berry there because they told me the story and all that there. But I knew Dave Berry very well. But that's what happened, and the lions were a fearful enemy. Anyway, after 8 days, I think, the bike, the DC-7 didn't arrive, and we extracted ourselves. And I was so glad to get out of Botswana.
Andre, that actually raises an issue which I want to just ask you about. It sounds like there was a security leak of some sort, and somebody was probably tipped off that you chaps had been deployed. And this raises the question of who was working for who. And just recently, the Ken Flower debate has been very much a subject of discussion. And to my mind, I feel the evidence is overwhelmingly leads to the conclusion that he was a double agent, and he was working for British intelligence. But there are others who disagree. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on Ken Flower.
I can really, with strong conviction, tell you, he himself admitted that with Lord Owen. But I had intelligence feedback from South Africa. So General Lewis headed intelligence in South Africa, and he would let me know who was leaking information. And Ken Flower was one of them. Now, he wouldn't make that up, Hannes, when he was telling me that, because my role was very serious. But that was the man I was told to watch out for, Hannes. And I don't think South Africa got it wrong. And I don't think General Lewis, the general, for the special forces, got that wrong. And yes, he was one of the men that we were told not to trust. And I think, yes, I don't care what other people say. Hannes, he was really involved in spy, sort of double espionage. And he was telling the enemy about our moves. Yes, he was, Hannes. We knew that in SAS. Yeah. So I don't know why people would say, no, he wasn't a spy. He was a spy. And I don't know how you classify a spy, but he was telling the enemy about what we were going to do, and that jeopardized our position. And for me, that's treachery. You know what I mean? He was prepared to sacrifice our lives for the sake of telling the enemy what we're doing.
Andre, just before we finish, just touch on the Lancaster House story. I know you had quite an interesting discussion with General Lutz about the death of John Giles at Lancaster House, which was put down to suicide. I mean, I know that there's a lot of reason to believe that it wasn't a suicide, but you've got something to say about that.
Hannes, let me tell you what happened. So they contact me. This is Bureau of State Security in South Africa. They tell me about John Giles. They said he didn't commit suicide. He was assassinated by MI6 or something with some hypodermic syringe. I remember that. I was at Cabrit when they told me that. And they wanted me to go to London And they mentioned names, General Lutz. He said he thinks I was the man to go to London and he wants me to take these men out. Now, Hannes, I never told you this, but I did go try to get to London. I landed in Zurich. I haven't told anyone this. I had a Rhodesian passport. You couldn't go far with that, with world sanctions against us. And then, Hannes, I had to get to London. And so I went through Schaffhausen there in Germany, through Germany. I walked, hitchhiked, caught the train. I remember these trains were exceptionally fast, like bullets, because I thought when I got close to Holland, I'd jump off the train. But you couldn't jump off the train because the train would go like 100 kilometers an hour. It wasn't like our steam engines. I couldn't jump off. Anyway, I got to a little town before Holland, Arnhem, before Arnhem. And so I thought, now I've got to get into Holland. And there's a big river. I can't remember the river's name. That night, Hannes, I undressed. I put my pack on my back, a Bergen, and I waded through this river. It was like 100 meters, freezing cold. You know, when I got to the other side, Hannes, I couldn't walk. I couldn't move. That's how cold it was. Anyway, I got dressed again because now I'm heading for London, you see, via Holland. And I'm walking on the side of the road. It was a stupid thing to do. And the grenspolitie, that's what they're called, the grenspolitie. Next time I see these sirens and these gray cars, they surround me, they arrest me. And they say, what are you doing here? So I said, I've come from Rhodesia, I'm touring. Anyway, I would not brush my teeth with Colgate or anything like that because of my bush experience. I would use only bicarb soda. They found this bicarb soda in my pack and they thought this was heroin. So I was arrested. I was locked up for the night. I can't remember the name of the town. Okay. And honest,
what were your instructions?
To go and take out these men. They knew them by name. I mean, they're not going to do that to me. They felt I was the man. I don't think I should have done that, Hannes. But anyway, Hannes, so I'm sitting in jail, a concrete slab, freezing cold, like winter. And they want to know where I come from. How did I get here? I told them I hiked, I walked. I said, how did you cross the river? I said, I crossed my foot. They said, that's impossible because the water was up to there. It was a big river. And I crossed. They said, but it's freezing cold. I said, exactly. And so they took me back to, under armed escort. I couldn't go to the toilet, Hannes. The guy stood with me in the toilet, back to Germany. The German authorities, the policemen, they also interrogated me. I got a fine, Deutschmark. And then, where was it? I can't remember, but they flew me back to Rhodesia. So I was under armed escort. I didn't get there. But that's what actually happened, Hannes. Yes. I was told that information, Hannes. So yes, that's what happened there. But they said he was murdered. Well, I don't, I just went by the intelligence that I was receiving, which was really top intelligence, Hannes, because these guys, Bureau of State Security, were in cohesion with the French, with the Israelis. You know what I mean? They didn't fool around, Hannes. Much bigger than our setup. And they were the ones that told me about Flower. They said, don't trust him, because there was a big security leak. Yeah. So, Hannes, I've forgotten, where were you up to?
No, we were just discussing these the security leaks and where things were going wrong, and who was responsible for getting the word out to the other side. And there's very little doubt in my mind that Ken Flower was involved, but I suspect he wasn't alone. I think there were more.
Hannes, you're right. I got as far as just before Amsterdam, because from Amsterdam I was going to go to London. You see, but I got caught on that road. The roads were like marshland on either side. You have to stick to the road, and that's where they caught me. I shouldn't have walked on the road, and that blew all that.
Andre, the stories never stop coming from you. That's for sure. This is all news. A lot of this is news to me, and we've covered a lot of ground over the last few years. So absolutely fascinating. But Andre, thanks again for your time, and I know what you've got to tell us is of great interest to a lot of people, and I'm really very happy that I've been able to help you get this down on the record.
Thanks, Hannes.
So thanks again, Andre.
Okay, Hannes. God bless you. Have a good day. Okay.
God bless you too, Andre. Cheers, mate.
Bye-bye. Cheers, Hannes.